to adventure. Like the call to leave behind the everyday world, the common, ordinary world of family and social reality, and go in quest of something, not even quite sure what it is, but somehow motivated. This whole question of what starts somebody off, on the transformation quest, the process is a very interesting one.
What's up, guys? What's up, fellas? Alright, this streaming thing is, I'm not gonna lie, it has its little moments where I'm a little frustrated at a couple things. But shout out to everybody who showed up to the stream. I don't know what happened the first time. It just wasn't showing. It just wasn't, it wasn't working, or it was slow. Over time, I'll learn and figure out what I need to do to make these things run properly. I already have a couple ideas, things that I should do to kind of make things better as time goes on. But for now, thanks for you guys for showing up to the stream. And today is mostly going to be about today is mostly going to follow what we were doing before regarding research. Okay, you can go away. And then you were what I was looking for. I was looking for this. So, y'all bear with me for a second. Yeah. Anyway, guys, like I said, it's not as comfortable to be doing these, but y'all gonna join me in the stream as we cook. We try to cook today. I don't know when you usually when these things happen, because I believe the Instagram is not working. At least it was not. It's not doing what I want it to, and I just scrapped Kick. I just scrapped it. So it's a rocky start, but we will push through. The most part for this stream, I'm thinking that we first. Let me see. Who do we got here in the stream? Who do we got here? Alright, we're live on Twitch. We're live. Are we live on YouTube? Yes. Okay. So we're live on YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok. I believe we're live on TikTok. So let's see what we got here. All right. So for the most part in this stream, I'm just gonna be doing a lot of just doing some research on things, and so you guys are gonna be seeing me try to get almost fall in love with that cowboy vibe. For those who've been following the stream, the point of the stream is to kind of you guys join me as we cook in the kitchen. You guys are part of it, and I'm making this new shonen cowboy manga. For those who don't know me, I am the creator of Apple Black, published and serialized on Saturday AM. You can get the light novel or the first 5 volumes. Those are available anywhere you get your manga, to be honest. And I highly recommend you check out all the other Saturday AM manga as well. And today's stream will be a little bit more chill. So maybe we don't really start drawing yet, especially with all the stuff that went down. But yeah, because I don't even know if the second time around, I don't know if everybody got notifications, because usually I think maybe if the stream goes out and then it cuts off and then it comes back again, I don't think people notice. And then when it came back again, it wasn't the right settings, and it's just like, ugh. So, bear with me. As time goes on, I'll get a little bit more acquainted with the streaming of things. But all right, so I have some videos I want to watch that will kind of help put me in that state to add to this document. Let me see. Yeah, so that's what we're gonna do. Rango. Somebody did mention Rango. So Rango is on the list already. Yeah, it is on the list already. So I'm going to kind of watch some videos and things of that nature to kind of get acquainted with what we're trying to do here. And then we'll build from there, right? As usual with any questions you guys may have, you can leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer as best as I can. But let's see if we can get this show on the road. The first video. Not Public Enemies.
Western movies are a dime a dozen. The genre became so oversaturated that the very things that made them unique became predictable tropes and cliches that are now referenced in pop culture.
I know you.
To many, it seems like Westerns reached their creative limit a while ago. Another genre of film that is also really saturated is animated talking animal movies. While some of the ones made recently are still quite good, there's just so many similar ones out there that they're starting to blur into each other, especially in their aesthetic designs. Most people watch them, laugh at the dog joke, and forget. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but it starts to get old after a while.
Yeah, I don't want to, just breeze through these videos. You can actually, watch the real video, the main video from the original channel. So Rango, a bizarre masterpiece. But I want to get to the Western stuff.
Released in 2011 and directed by Gore Verbinski, Rango tells the tale of a chameleon who is thrust from his home and is left to wander the desert in search of not only his self-identity, but a small town akin to something out of a spaghetti western, where he eventually becomes a gunslinging sheriff who embarks on a mission to protect and serve the anthropomorphic townsfolk of Dirt. The distinct aesthetic of Rango is exceptionally unique, especially with its character designs. Like I mentioned before, the traditional design style for basically every animated talking animal movie ever is exactly what you'd expect. Clean, cute, and marketable. Again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that it's starting to get really repetitive. The character designs in Rango, however, are refreshingly unconventional, inventive, and fitting to the theme of the film. Every character, even the ones in the background, are visually dripping with personality. Where other movies...
I don't know if this is giving the information that I would like, but I'm getting more from the visuals, actually, and just the setting of everything, but that's something I can get from the other movies. So I think this is more of a different kind of discussion, but let's see the story.
Aesthetic, you'd be mistaken. While the common theme in most Western films is a discovery of redemption, the theme in Rango is the discovery of identity.
Who am I? I could be anyone.
The protagonist starts off nameless and alone in a vacuum. He's an empty book, a blank canvas thirsting to be someone, a hero. His character design even reflects that, being that he's a chameleon that can't blend in. Throughout the course of the film, he creates a name, a character that belongs to it full of mannerisms and a past, and conveniently gets out of conflict, not by his own actions, but by luck. When brought face to face with Rattlesnake Jake, a real gunslinger with probably the coolest character design in the whole movie, who also symbolizes death, Rango's masquerade falls apart. He's not a gunslinging heroic sheriff. He's just a cowardly lizard trying to be something he's not. He crosses to the other side of the road, a metaphor for death, and meets the spirit of the West, an obvious reference to Clint Eastwood, the heroic face of Western cinema. The spirit of the West tells Rango that instead of trying to act like a hero, just be and do what needs to be done. It's not about what you think of yourself or how you wish others to think of you as. It's about just existing as who you are right now, free of the desire to be someone else, and doing what must be done for the betterment of others.
It's not about you. It's about them. No man can walk out on his own story.
From the death of his ego, he can now rise and become the hero that the people need him to be. He uncovers the mayor's plan to abuse his power over the innocent for his own personal gain, stands up to death, and frees the people. Though it's a simple story, the way it presents it is what really makes the movie stand out. The film has some really trippy, surreal moments.
Where are your friends now, amigo?
Self-aware writing.
The hero cannot exist in a vacuum. What our story needs is an ironic, unexpected event that will propel the hero into conflict.
Humor intended for more mature audiences.
Are those real?
And witty banter between characters.
Well, you got a little something in your eye there.
Oh, that there's conjunctivitis, sir. It's hereditary.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear it's not contagious.
And though bizarre, it all works together masterfully. What surprisingly stands out about this film, besides its visual style, is the action. The action and spectacle in this film is handled so much better than that of most live-action movies that I don't know if that's really good or just sad. But regardless, I'm incredibly grateful that it exists. A sequence that perfectly showcases the action and spectacle of Rango is the canyon chase scene. In this 5-minute scene, you have moonshine-drinking mole people riding bats in a canyon while shooting machine guns Battlefield 1 style at our heroes trying to escape on a wagon being pulled by a boar while fighting the anthropomorphic Mad Max hordes to a western rendition of Flight of the Valkyries. And it's not just
Mad Max is... Yeah, true.
It's the concept of such ridiculously over-the-top things happening on screen that makes this scene amazing, but the way it's all pulled together. The cinematography, though not exclusive to just this scene, is brilliant and immersive, complete with wide sweeping shots that clearly present the action in an engaging way. The music, composed by Hans Zimmer, is adventurous and exciting. The use of character
Hans Zimmer did the
designs are amazing and clever. For example, this owl turns his head all the way around to avoid getting punched in the face. The sound design sucks you into the spectacle. And this moment where the toad is single-handedly reloading and firing a rifle at bats ridden by mole people while hanging onto the side of the wagon as the music swells is without a doubt one of the most satisfying, badass things I've ever seen in a movie. And I really mean that. I adore that. Okay. Rango adds a fantasy element to the witch right off in the desert to Spider-Bait's cover of Ghost Riders in the Sky.
Oh, that's hot.
For a world that I want to see more of. Rango is a weird movie. It's an animated talking animal western about the search for self-identity with a gritty, unique aesthetic.
Okay, so I do, some things actually did end up being a little valuable here with, you know, the identity and just some of the visuals and how the action was handled. Not as much as I would have, not as much as I take from it, but it was interesting, and the character designs were really good. So Rango is a movie I haven't seen, but wouldn't mind. Let me see here. Okay, let's move on now. Let's go to the next one. Where is it? This is tougher to manage than I thought. There you go. Now let's do something a little bit more down to the core of like really understanding cowboys. Like, what is a cowboy? Da, da, da. Yeah, this will be valuable. I think knowing the actual, at least some of the actual history, that might be more of what we need.
Roads and more. In 1800, at the rate the expansion had been going, most Americans assumed it would.
So this is overly sarcastic productions. History summarized the Wild West.
Partly because despite how comparatively recent and the Wild West is an alluring yet tricky historical setting, partly because despite how comparatively recent and familiar it is to most of us, the lines between the realistic and the fantastic are astoundingly blurry. A lot of that confusion can be attributed to the emblematic character archetype of the cowboy. In real life, they did exactly what their name implies, herd cows, and that was it, but the trope has a truly staggering amount of ahistorical character baggage attached.
Okay. Off rip. Originally herded cows. So I think the more historical videos are actually going to be a little bit more helpful, I think, because that already gave me some ideas. Herd cows. As the name implies.
In popular culture, it's more often portrayed as
It's hand.
No. Whew, that was a close one. Almost allowed my abiding love for roguish Matthew Mercer characters to derail this number completely. Now, the name's Blue. Let's do some history. Okay, so right off, McCree actually helps make my point. He doesn't ride around herding cows. He's a gunslinger, a noble vigilante out on the frontier defending justice, the American way, and the payload. Sometimes. Unfortunately for our boy Jesse, the archetype of the gunslinger is just that, an archetype, and you'd be really hard-pressed to actually find one in the real-life West. It sounds surprising, but nearly all settlements had strict firearms regulations precisely to stop things from being quite so wild. Because
Wait. Say that again?
find one in the real-life West. It sounds surprising, but nearly all settlements... Gunslinger, a noble vigilante out on the frontier defending justice, the American way, and the payload. Sometimes. Unfortunately for our boy Jesse, the archetype of the gunslinger is just that, an archetype, and you'd be really hard-pressed to actually find one in the real-life West. It sounds surprising, but nearly all settlements had strict firearms regulations.
So this is a fact about the Wild West. While allowed to the open frontier, firearms are strictly prohibited. In nearly all towns, the most famous shootout in Western history only happened because 3 outlaws refused to turn in their guns to the sheriff. Smithsonian. Okay, this is like articles and stuff. Okay, you know, valuable information. Will I use it? Maybe, I don't know. Not sure yet. Keep going.
Precisely to stop things from being quite so wild. Because turns out everyone having guns tends to cause a lot more problems than it solves. The Wild West had gun control. Who
Facts. Facts.
knew? Now there were lawmen, and some famous ones to boot, like Whyt Earp and the legendary 3,000 arrests of badass extraordinaire Bass.
Hold the phone. Okay. Okay. Whyt Earp, and then who is this?
Reeves, but they were the exceptions rather than the rules. But they were the extraordinaire Bass Reeves, but they were the exceptions rather than the rule. So, to get a proper picture of the American West, let's jump way back to where it all started. Oddly enough, the West really began in...
Bass Reeves was black. At least he looked like it. Do some research on who that was, or maybe the other videos will actually touch on it. But that was interesting. Maybe there's some history there that I can touch on. But
17th and 18th century Central America, where the incoming Spaniards used their skill as horsemen to herd cattle. See where I'm going here?
Okay, Spanish.
Used their skill as horsemen to herd cattle. See where I'm... Enough, the West really began in 17th and 18th century Central America, where the incoming Spaniards used their skill as horsemen to herd cattle. See where I'm going here? After a couple hundred years, the Viceroyalty of New Spain gained independence to become Mexico, and the practice of cattle herding passed down into the tradition of the vaqueros, which is, surprise, surprise, Spanish for cowboy. Independence to become Mexico. After a couple hundred years, the Viceroyalty of New Spain gained independence to become Mexico.
New Spain, Mexico. Now, some of this is like the manga. Again, I don't want the manga to be the USA. I just wanted to draw some inspiration from that while vaguely having some nods to it, some clear nods to it. Now, I think in the last stream we talked about how, you know, there actually is, especially with the power system and things like that, and some of the world building has some similarities to, say, a One Piece. And so that will kind of continue here. But even like Naruto, how it's obviously has some Japanese influence with the idea of ninja and all of that, but it's not really Japan. So some of this would be valuable. Some of this is valuable to know, but I'll still take a couple liberties with a couple things.
And the practice of cattle herding passed down into the tradition of the vaqueros, which is, surprise, surprise, Spanish for cowboy. Thing is...
Vaqueros. I don't know if I'm spelling that right, but it doesn't matter right now.
is, a third of modern America used to be Mexico, so nearly the entire West was originally a mix of Mexicans and Native Americans, and unsurprisingly there's been some linguistic and cultural bleed. Loads of Western iconography, from chaps and lassos to bandanas and hats, all transferred from a foundation of Mexican traditions, which is a really cool surprise. But stuff got really interesting when American settlers moved westward and then themselves adopted lots of those elements and started working as vaqueros, or if you can't pronounce Spanish, buckaroos. Westward expansion had been going on from the instant the East
Buckaroos? No, really? Okay. Again, don't know if I'm spelling that right. Doesn't matter right now. We'll figure that out later. But a lot of this is, you know, as usual, not necessarily American settlers adopting what was already there.
Coast was colonized, but with the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, discovery of Californian gold in 1848, and the subsequent construction of a buttload of railroads to bring goods and people back and forth across the country in a way that was way more efficient than the Oregon Trail.
Railroads, so the trains, railroads. Okay.
Manifest Destiny kicked into overdrive. Tons of people left their cushy eastern lives to cross the Mississippi River and catch a train towards those sweet, delectable homestead subsidies. Yeah, far from being the last refuge against the big awful tyranny of the American government, the West was only settled by extensive government sponsorship of communities, railroads, and more. In 1800, at the rate the expansion had been going, most Americans assumed it would take another couple centuries to push all the way across the continent. But hey, that's what happens when you have really effective federal directives. Much of that development was peaceful, but a lot of it wasn't. So, speaking of, I've said elsewhere that Cowboys versus Indians is a 2-gallon barrel of worms with dynamic jack-in-the-box launching action, and in brief, here's why. That story typically portrays the noble cowboys as defending the western settlers from the savage Indians who were in turn seeking to destroy all that was star-spangled and good. But the cowboys didn't even fight the Native Americans. The government did. Specifically, they used 2 key tactics during the Plains Indian Wars of the 1850s, 60s, and 70s to stake their claim on the West and shoo away its previous inhabitants. The first and most obvious one is outright fighting. Now, Cowboys versus Indians sort of presupposes a level-ish playing field, but the reality was anything but. Government soldiers pushed west and killed natives, which in turn drove the natives to retaliate, and things just kept escalating, getting worse and worse and worse as each fought for the land. And the second strategy involved the mass extinction of bison, which was a staple resource in the Native American economies. In the span of a century, a combination of outright
Bison. So, you know, got a little mini war going on that can tie. So if I wanted to do things where, you know, add to this fictional world and add some history and culture, I can draw from these things and these kind of wars that might have maybe helped usher in the current state of affairs that exist in the manga. So this is good. This is good. This is good, no? This is good. Yeah, Bass Reeves. All of this is valuable. All this is working out. This is good.
Hunting and indirect habitat loss tanked bison populations from 40 million to just a few hundred. Yikes. If you've seen my previous video about Buffalo Bill, you can get a sense of just how massive an operation this really was. So yeah, I take issue with Cowboys versus Indians because 1, no cowboys. And 2, the American government was insanely overpowered by comparison on account of guns and the literal decimation of Native American populations from smallpox a century earlier. I wish...
Yep.
much, it was just a cinematic fight between two colorful bands of warriors. But in reality, it was a calculated subjugation of the native population by any means available to take their land and resources because they could. So less and more.
It's gold, and it's mine, mine, mine.
Okay, so now America has all this land to itself, California's off doing its old gold rushy coastal seaport metropolis thing, but what about the rest of the West? All that middle stuff? Well, compared to the rest of the country, it's pretty sparse today, and it was pretty sparse then. Aside from family-owned homestead ranches, society took shape along railway lines near pockets of natural resources, and hilariously, but perhaps...
That is true. That is true, because even when you... well, I don't know, but it just reminds me of the landscape in Westworld, where it's like as soon as you get to Westworld on the train, that's why you see a bunch of stuff, and the brothels and the houses and things like that. And then it's the further away from that is essentially the further away from civilization or something.
Perhaps unsurprisingly, around brothels.
So that means, you see, now that from a geographical standpoint, the way I build the world, like literally place things and design the whole landscape, that's something worth remembering. So in fact, let me write that down. Station closer to railroads.
With the sole notable exception of that one time in the 1860s that America nearly ripped itself in half, westward expansion and settlement and development continued at quite a clip. And honestly, 100 years might not sound like it was that fast, but consider the comparison. The pre-United States eastern seaboard took several different European powers nearly 300 years to colonize. Now, it was the same rough length as the coastline between Amsterdam and the Straits of Gibraltar, and they crossed an ocean to do it, so still, not bad. But then, in the span of a century and some change, the United States by itself had developed a functioning and lucrative territory 10 times the size of the original colonies. That's a metric Roman Empire's worth of land in just 100 years. With all this history now laid out, I'll be 100% honest. In my personal opinion, the West was not wild. Between the strong military presence, the pervasive government administration and economic assistance, and the strict law enforcement, I don't see much of an argument for why it was any more wild then than it is now. The main difference is there's more stuff there now. Okay, so now that I've thoroughly de-romanticized the West, sorry about that.
Well, I'm not going to use any of that because, again, one, I'm not trying to be historically accurate, and two, he's on historical fact, or at least according to him. Obviously, right now, just kind of taking everything at his word, and I'm assuming it's correct. You got to do a little bit more research before you just accept everything that you hear. But assuming it's fact, then I want the dramatic. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not trying to be realistic here. At least that's not my goal. Sometimes there is interesting stuff in the realistic, but that is not the purpose here. Feel me? It's not what we're trying to do here.
Where did the myth that we all know actually come from? I think that its roots really lie in a handful of colorful characters. The people who took this new, larger-than-life land and did things that no one else could. People like Buffalo Bill, Annie Oakley, Butch Cassidy, Billy the Kid.
Okay, more things to research. Annie Oakley.
Things that no one else could. People like Buffalo Bill, Annie Oakley.
Billy the Kid, obviously. Who else?
Oakley, Butch Cassidy, Billy the Kid, real...
Butch Cassidy.
life Old West Batman Bass Reeves, and loads of others with personal stories that are truly wild. Their lives in turn launched a demand for entertainment like Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, which spread across America and Europe like crazy. Then, after the characters in demand were established, technology kicked in and Hollywood movies put the Wild West into overdrive. At the risk of getting way further down the rabbit hole than I want to, I'll do my best to keep this to the point. Hollywood got its start because Thomas Edison was being an asshole, as Thomas Edison is wont to do. He had a lot of patents for the new motion picture tech, but filmmakers found that if they were all the way on the other side of the country, Edison couldn't do anything to stop them from using it without his permission. Truly, the lawlessness of the West is on full display in this daring show of corporate trickery. I'm honestly kind of surprised the Hollywood sign doesn't just say "Suck it, Edison." Anyway, a combination of good weather and handy geography for various locations quickly made Southern California the go-to place to make movies, and their favorite genre was the Western. It took a little bit of time to find their footing, but John Wayne's 1939 Stagecoach was an absolute hit and kicked the genre into high gear. And Hollywood remained obsessed with Westerns through the 1960s. On paper, the movies evoked a lot of the excitement in people's imaginations of the West, with plots like the construction of railroads, lawmen hunting outlaws, outlaws running from lawmen, cowboys protecting their ranches, the US government fighting the Native Americans, typical, if a bit exaggerated Western stuff. But the unifying thread was that nearly all of the protagonists were white, which is not only generally annoying, but blatantly untrue in this case, especially with the West being such a massively multicultural place in reality. Okay, let's see. There were white Americans, Native Americans, Mexican vaqueros,
Not this, you're speaking my language. See, this is why you do it, right? I can imagine somebody from, someone that doesn't know the history of stuff, and then they were just basing it off of maybe the movies that they've seen. If they were to make a cowboy manga, they would probably just make everybody what, and then just call it a day, because that's what everybody is used to, right? When in reality, there's more to it than that. And when you start to show all these other characters, then everybody's gonna say, "Ooh, it's forced," or "Is this?" It's not really, is it? Actually, keeping everything white is what's forced. But we moved.
Chinese immigrants who essentially carried the railroad effort, and
okay. Now, again, some of this is I'm just writing it down. To really get the hang of it, you're going to have to do even more research on these things individually. But for the most part, it's giving me what I need.
Black Americans who at one point made up a quarter of all cowboys.
Interesting. Interesting.
I haven't even had time to talk about them because I've been so focused on Native Americans and Mexicans. There was so much diversity going on out there, all in large numbers and all in roughly the same rural Western boat. It was a team effort through and through. The archetypal cowboy myth bothers me so much because there is no archetypal cowboy. This is such a pervasive and resilient misconception that plays into so many gross American xenophobias, and it's overwhelmingly the fault of these Westerns. Curse you, Hollywood! And then, on the other side,
curse them, but we're going to kind of add to it, but maybe try and correct it, kind of, sort of, with what we're making right now. You all get the hang of it.
Of the Atlantic, there was another type of Western movie. It started with Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars, starring Clint Eastwood. This Italian brand of Western, dubbed the Spaghetti Western because they were made by Italians in Italy, yay, stereotypes, became hugely...
Ah, that's why it's called Spaghetti Western. Wow. That's... maybe problematic in a different way, but okay.
Popular in Europe and America, because they were good-ass movies. In the decade after Fistful of Dollars, half of Italian movies were Westerns, and unlike American Westerns, which attempted to ground themselves in history of theoretically plausible characters, protagonists like Eastwood's The Stranger were neither outlaw nor lawmen. They were completely unattached wanderers, unaffected by local politics, and quite unbothered by violence, and that became a staple trait of spaghetti Westerns. For example, Franco Nero's Django has almost no dialogue but a ton of murder. Hollywood, for all its drama and popular appeal, had certain rules for censoring violence, but Italy had none of that. So spaghetti westerns were far more action-packed and brutal. A dude gets his ear cut off in one of these movies. It's nuts. And that's the key difference. These guys wanted to tell exciting stories. They didn't care if it was accurate or not, so they leaned into that fantasy of the West and created the myth of the wandering gunslinger as a one-man army against the world. The general distinction here is that Hollywood made cowboys white, but Italy made cowboys badasses. So, to recap, the myth and the history of the American West are two wildly different things. The truth is that the frontier was a diverse place that was won by conquest and developed through effective administration and lucrative economics. The myth, of course, is... The myth and the history of the American West are two wildly different things. The truth is that the frontier was a diverse place that was won by conquest and developed through effective administration and lucrative...
Okay. Wild West Frontier.
Of economics. The myth, of course, is...
It's high noon.
Yeah, what he said. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with romanticizing history to tell an engaging story and just have fun if you are being upfront about it. But misrepresenting history while feigning authenticity is always extremely dangerous. In short, have fun while you're playing Red Dead Redemption 2, but recognize that the damaging elements of the Western myth won't go away unless we confront them. To put it another way,
Justice ain't gonna dispense it.
So now I gotta do some Red Dead Redemption research with a grain of salt.
So,
Good to know. Good to know. This is a good video. This is a good video. This is a really good video. It's really helpful. And so this is the kind of stuff you'd have to do sometimes, depending on what you're creating, depending on what manga or it doesn't have to be a manga. It doesn't even have to be sequential art. You could be making a film and let me see here. Is there any issue with the Twitch? Are we still on Twitch? We good on the Twitchies? What is going on? Uh-oh. See what I'm saying? Not too sure what's happening. Are we still on YouTube? Yeah, the Chinese during this time were super mistreated. Gotcha. Write that down. Western lore, fire. So yeah, there's a lot about it that, we found valuable. I'm making a Native American dark fantasy Western, and I'm entering it in Saturday AM in April during Summer of Manga. I'd like to talk to you if you ever have the chance. That would be cool. It'll be a fresh, new idea. I'm sure we would like to see it, and during that process, we'll get to it. You're more likely to catch me on Discord, but however you can. I'm always down to help out and share thoughts and things of that nature. I'm also Native American, also Native myself, and I have a lot of info. Nice. But yeah, that video was helpful, even if everything wasn't accurate. I'm assuming it was, but at least it'll shove you in that direction, and it's already giving me ideas of what I could do. Just a couple ideas. So off rip, that was a W. Put that in the chat. I don't know if we're still live on Twitch though. Something's up with the Twitchies, and that's weird. That's suspicious. Okay, we're still good. I'm going to... Yeah, I'll pull it out for now, but let's just... It seems like the Twitch is working again, because it's like, golly, bro, I'm supposed to be live on Instagram. I'm clearly not. Clearly, unfortunately. But on TikTok, what's going on? I'm native, if it helps. Okay, cool. Also been following for years. Okay. All right, so cool. So this was valuable. Now the next video, I don't know how valuable this video is going to be. We'll try it, but we'll see. Who's Elmer Kelton? And what did he say? You see, this I don't even know what this is, but it already gave me an idea. Cowboy is an individual, tall, short, thin, heavy, loud, quiet, or none of the above. Bars. Let me see. Emma Keaton. You know, this is kind of like, remember how we're talking in the last video? I was like, okay, what is a cowboy? What could that be? And you know, this, I don't know how this will come into play just yet, but it's getting some wheels turning. Cowboy is an individual. What'd they say? Tall, short, thin, heavy. Loud, quiet. Or none of the above. I'll do like a ... or none of the above. I might even, if I use this in maybe some dialogue somewhere, I might even tweak it a little bit, but I like this. That's giving me some ideas for some potential characters. This music better not be problematic, because I'll be pissed. In fact, I'm going to mute.
Someone's not there to be.
No.
Ranching, good people, honest cowboys. You know, every cowboy you know, just good to their word, and what they say is what they mean.
That's just a good person.
Showing up, get told the job to do the job right. You know, put your whole heart into it. Do the best.
Okay, this is the basic inspirational mumbo jumbo that you can really apply to any profession, right? Because they're just describing good people. You know what I mean? Essentially hard workers, right? If your manga was about firemen, you could do the same thing. It's like, what? So was that Fire Force? Have you noticed that a bunch of shonen manga, like somebody just sits down and they come up with, they pick a profession and they just build some supernatural action world around that profession. Firemen, I'm sure doctors at some point. I'm trying to do one with cowboys, but I'm sure something about cowboys has kind of been done. Ninjas, obviously. Samurais done to death, because those ones they're easy because they already lend themselves to action. Death gods, Shinigami. So sometimes it's not, you know, regular modern day professions reimagined. Sometimes it's like folklore, historical mumbo jumbo as well. You got wizards, witches, yada yada yada. But you just pick a job, pick a profession or some label, and then kind of expand it into some kind of shonen action big battle world. And you know, it's fun to do. It's fun to build. But what I'm gathering from this video is basic stuff. You're good.
You can. It might not be the best at it, and it might not be the greatest.
Just give it your all type. You know.
Do all you can.
Politician, you know, imagine a manga about politicians and there are supernatural politicians and you have elections and da 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 da. That could be fun, but also complicated. But yeah, I get the vibe of this one. I don't want to why the music. I'm afraid of that music. Okay, so we're gonna move on. What about you? But the beginning of the video, that was useful. Just that line.
No man should have cowboy boots in his wardrobe. Unless you're a cowboy, of course. Paul Weller. Pop quiz. Who's the most famous cowboy of all?
No man should have cowboy boots in his wardrobe. Wait, who said that?
No man should have cowboy boots in his wardrobe. Unless you're a cowboy, of course. Paul Weller.
Paul Weller. I don't know who that is, but we'll see. We'll see. Again, some of these I might like. It's just good to know, but I might do something else. Cowboy boots. To be honest, that's another thing. Cowboy boots. That's another thing to add to the concept stuff that we did from last time. Because they have a distinct look, like cowboy boots and the attire overall. The star on the sheriff. Okay, so no man should have cowboy boots in their wardrobe. Unless they're a cowboy, of course. So no man should have cowboy boots in their wardrobe. Unless they're a cowboy, of course. Again, I like to write all these stuff down. Will I use it? Maybe. Maybe not. Paul Weller. Don't know who that is. Y'all can leave in the chat if you know who these people are. I have no clue.
Pop quiz. Who's the most famous cowboy of all time? Buffalo Bill. Wyatt Earp.
Okay, see some of these names we've already touched on.
Billy the Kid. Jesse James.
It's kind of like, again, I think just building this world right now, I think is most similar to like One Piece, because even One Piece has some, I believe it has some actual pirates, like Teach was actually a pirate if I'm remembering that correctly. If people have seen, let's say I was doing One Piece, I would have definitely watched Black Sails. Black Sails was really good. Excuse me. And so Black Sails had some of that stuff from Treasure Planet. Well, it's not Treasure Planet, but Treasure Island. I don't know. Some of you know what I'm talking about. And there's some historical accuracy there a little bit, I think. But it would be nice to play with some real figures in this world. And maybe, again, remember, we're trying to create a one-shot. So I might just mention their names, but I might not do much with them. You know, I might not even show them at all or something. But it's interesting to know, and it will help build that world and that lore, because it's like, it's giving me a lot of cool ideas.
Will Rogers. Gene Autry.
Gene Autry already just looked like, these are not the Cowboys I'm talking about, but Will Rogers. I'm going to research all these people. Will the Mean Machine Rogers. I don't know. Gene how's that spelled? Autry, okay.
Butch Cassidy. John Wayne. And I know some.
John Wayne.
You guys are thinking John Wayne, right? That's who I would have guessed. But the most famous cowboy in history wasn't an outlaw, wasn't a lawman, wasn't a musician, and wasn't a famous actor. So who's the world's most famous cowboy? His name is Darrell Winfield.
Don't be selling me cap now. This never heard of this one. Darrell Winfield. And another thing is, you know, even though I might use these names, I might, you know, all of them, almost all of them kind of look alike, vibe alike. Obviously, I'm not here to create some historically accurate thing. So I'm going to be mostly making up characters. So, and again, if these are famous figures, I'm not going to shoehorn all of them into a one shot. It might be one of those things where I say maybe Buffalo Bill is some legendary gunslinger mumbo, blah, 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 but he's not actually in the one shot. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know.
A rancher from Wyoming. And although most likely you've never heard of his name, you will recognize his silhouette. Gentlemen, I'm talking about the Marlboro Man. And from 1968 to 1989...
If I was going to use all their names, if I was going to do anything with all of them, and let's say they were like, if you guys remember in the last video where I talked about how maybe their tattoos could help like give them powers, he's the Marlboro. He would be Smoker. He would I don't know, use smoke powers somehow and give you cancer. He'd be the McHale or something. That would be funny. That would be funny. Let me see. Yeah, Black Sails was really good. Yes, Black Sails was dope. Let me just make sure the streams are still running properly. Yeah, the Discord links to the Discord and everything are in the description, so you guys can always check that out. Yeah, you guys can always check that out. Let's see what else this guy's cooking. This might be...
Over a 30...
This might not be the video I'm looking for, but...
year run, Darrell was that man. We saw this on billboards, it was in magazines, it was everywhere. You would go
to... He's the same guy the whole time?
To, you know, East Europe, you would go into parts of Africa, and people knew who the Marlboro Man was. Now, the thing about Darrell Winfield is he actually...
Darrell the Marlboro Man Winfield.
Actually wasn't an actor. He was a ranch hand, I believe at the time, in Montana, and he was spotted by the guys over at the Leo Barnett Company, and they were so impressed that this guy, he intimidated them. He looked like the perfect cowboy. They were able to capture it on film, they were able to capture tons of pictures, and this became the iconic look of the cowboy for most people in the world. In today's video, gents, we're talking about cowboy history. We're talking about how the cowboy ethos took over American culture in the 1950s. We're going to talk about why the ladies love cowboys, and I'm going to give you some practical tips, a little bit of advice on how to bring cowboy clothing in.
Another thing is like to really nail the dialogue. I like to look at some like the typical dialogue. That one I'm definitely going to like rewatch some film and like write some stuff down, like the way they talk, the way they say certain things, just to really add that extra layer of immersing you into that world versus how I would just normally create dialogue. Obviously there's always going to be a bit of me in there, but that shot of Westworld just reminded me of that.
To your modern wardrobe if you so choose. Guys, you ready? Let's do this. So the first question is, why in the world are they even called cowboys? I mean, they ride horses. Shouldn't they be called horse boys? No. Let's go back to the 16th century.
That's a good, that's even a good question that I can answer. Even the manga itself could be educational to a degree. Educational. Horse boys. Yeah.
Spanish bring horses over to the Americas, and we see in Mexico, what is now California, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, all of a sudden herding, ranching, being able to raise livestock. It's a very valuable skill. And we had a particular type of profession that popped up, vaqueros. And the vaqueros...
Hey, I spelled it correctly. Hey!
Were the cowboys. These guys have particular roping skills. They could ride, they could herd in a way that they actually earned that name and that distinction. Now, for the next 200 years, there's a lot of chaos in the Americas. We saw the independence of Mexico. We saw the formation of Texas. We saw the United States have a war with Mexico.
Yeah, formation of Texas, the Alamo. I was thinking about that. The Alamo might be relevant.
Mexico, and we saw all of the basically borders change up, but what really didn't change were the skills, were the things that were needed, till all of a sudden the railroads started expanding west. This was the whole manifest destiny in the United States, and all of a sudden it became profitable to move cattle out east up towards Chicago to the slaughterhouses, and there was a lot of money here. This is when we saw basically the cattle, rise of the cattle baron. $40 a head is what's...
So money, rise of the cattle head, bring in blah, 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 blah. Transporting livestock. Stock. Skill brought from New Mexico. Mexico. The vaqueros, eh?
Some of these cowboys were getting, and they were pushing in hundreds, if not, 1,000 cows at a time. This was big business, a lot.
See, this could help build what would eventually be maybe the potential premise of what the story could be. Like, it could be part of it.
Is what some of these cowboys were getting, and they were pushing in hundreds, if not, 1,000 cows at a time. This was big business, a lot of money, and there was also a lot of chaos, because where there's a lot of money, there's a lot of people that want to come in and want to take advantage of the situation. You saw the rise of the outlaws. We saw just a lot of lawlessness. This was the time of the real Wild Wild West. By the 1890s, however, this way of life started to disappear. A big part of it was privatized land. We saw barbed wire up all over the place, and it just became less profitable to be able to drive the herds up north. Now, at this point, the cowboy could have just become a footnote in history, but something interesting happened in 1903 called the Great Train Robbery. This was a silent film that was 12 minutes long that changed everything for the cowboy. Because this film, it's hard to understand today, but this was watched by pretty much every single person.
The Great Train Robbery. So, more train stuff. Y'all give me a second. So, the Great Train Robbery. Gotcha. Got it.
In the United States and in many other parts of Europe and the world. And for the first time, people were able to see this film. And it was action-packed for the time. This was something normally pretty controlled. A lot of them were boring. No, in this one, we had violence, we had action, we had all these looks that people over in Europe and other parts of the world had never seen. And all of a sudden, the cowboy became cemented as an iconic figure. And it was from the 1930s to the late 1960s that Western had its golden era in Hollywood. Starting in 1939, we saw films like John Ford's Stagecoach, 1946's Duel in the Sun, 1952's High Noon, 1953's Shane, which if you were a young man and you didn't know this movie, yeah, you had to watch this thing. And in these westerns, we saw some of the biggest actors of the time. And again, this was a time when everybody went to the movies. This was the form of entertainment. You had names like John Wayne all of a sudden become synonymous with the man of the West. The good, the bad, the ugly. I mean, who hasn't heard of this with Clint Eastwood? Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Amazing movie. If you haven't watched it, the ending, not gonna spoil it for you. It is amazing. Yeah, two guys versus the whole Bolivian army. And with the rise of television, there wasn't a kid in the United States that didn't know about the Lone Ranger and Tonto. And even in modern cinema, the Western is still a genre that's unto itself. Movies like Unforgiven, in my opinion, one of the best Westerns ever made, and perhaps Clint Eastwood's best film ever. 2007's No Country for Old Men. This one, not a traditional, more of a modern Western, but still, if you haven't seen that movie, I'm not gonna spoil it for you. Friggin' amazing. And a quick shout out to a few of my other favorite modern Westerns, Hell or High Water, amazing film. Two from Quentin Tarantino, The Hateful Eight and Django Unchained. And if you've got daughters and want to show them what a strong woman looks like, check out 2010's True Grit. Haley Steinfeld, an amazing performance. And I'm going to throw in 2018's The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. If you like a little bit of humor, if you like something that's a little bit, different, but still like, wow, check it out. An amazing film.
Okay. Ballad of Buster. Unforgiven. Again, I'm not going to watch all of these, but...
Now, if you've watched my channel for a while, you probably know that I'm from a small town in West Texas called Greenwood. It's right outside of Midland, Texas, and I grew up around people that basically were ranchers, people that had all types of animals. There were tons of kickers that went to my school. It's what we call the cowboys and cowgirl genre. You go to a romance novel area and look around, half of them are going to be women in the arms of a cowboy. So when you see this enough times, there's...
if this is a stereotype, do we play with it? Maybe. Maybe. The rancher's daughter.
Definitely a lot of marketing into this. In fact, I found an interesting article from a publisher talking about, cowboy romance novels have always sold well, especially if they have the word Texas in the title. So there you go. But in that same article, they go deeper. They say that really, I'd venture to say it's that the ideal image of cowboy.
I could do things with like certain names like Texas, Montana, blah, 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 blah. Is not as places in the manga, but the same way like All Might in My Hero kind of uses them. Southern or Western states. State names. Kind of. Question mark.
Always being heroic.
Definitely Texas.
Silent, smart, that draws women in. And I want to reinforce that it was actually two women that were stating this. To sum it up, they said that women dream of being held in the arms of a strong, rugged cowboy, and that men actually dream of being that idyllic version of the cowboy women fawn over. Now, how much of that's true? I don't know. But they did end it with this. Cowboys work hard. They get things done. They're respectful, and they dress nice. Boots and cowboy hats. And with that, gentlemen, let's now talk about...
I guess that's all you need. That was relevant. Cowboys work hard. Work hard. I don't know about the dress nice, because there's definitely going to be some, not everybody can dress nice. But definitely boots and cowboy hats. Same way we talked about the cowboy hats maybe being some kind of enhancer. The boots could be. Maybe. I don't know. Let's not get too carried away. Because again, if we're doing just a one-shot, you don't want to overwhelm the reader with so much in that first chapter. If the world is that big, you can hint at it, but you just want to reveal the relevant stuff, But it'd be cool to think about. Maybe there are some special boots out there or special attire here and there.
particular items in a cowboy's wardrobe, items that maybe you could even bring into yours. First up, let's talk about the cowboy boot. I know a lot of Texans are going to say, Antonio, what you're about to say is sacrilegious, but guys, we did not invent the cowboy boot. It was actually the English and the Germans that brought over two particular styles that the cowboy boot was inspired by. So the Wellington boot from the English, and then the Hessian boot.
It's putting us on game. Wellington and Hessian boots. Saw Wellington. From England.
From the Germans. Both of these came over during the Revolutionary War, and these were boots that made their way out west. Now, initially, Western boots didn't even have a left or a right foot. What a lot of Texans don't want to admit is that actually Kansas had a huge play in the Western boot. And I think it was 1870 census. There were 98 bootmakers apparently in Texas and over 120 in Kansas. And the reason being, again, all that cattle was being driven up north. And once you were paid, once you delivered that cattle, guess what? There were tons of vendors and boot makers and other clothing manufacturers right there, so you could spend your money and it would immediately go into your wardrobe. Now, the early Western boots, they were actually shorter. They didn't have as, high right here of a shaft, and this is the shaft in case you're wondering, of the boot. It was something that it was a lot more expensive, but the higher the shaft, the better it gave.
Shaft of the boot. We need to know this lingo, you know?
Protection of the the lower part of the leg. Now, the best bootmakers out west were actually immigrants coming over from Europe. So you had Italians, you had English, you had a number of Germans.
Let's see, Italians too.
Coming in, and what we saw is that they were spending a lot more time on the intricacies, on the details. And to this day, if you go over to company, and it's happened, it used to be
again, I don't want to watch the whole video on YouTube just so it's not any issue and yada yada yada.
To your death, and it's happened. It used to be a big. That's important. If you're riding a horse, you don't want to get dragged.
Let me see.
One of the things you're going to notice with Western boots is there's no lacing, and that means the boot can be slipped on and off. That's important. If you're riding a horse, you don't want to get dragged to your death, and it's happened. It used to be around because it's these are works of art when it comes to the design of the upper, of the overall shaft, the design of the boot, and these boots are expensive. We're talking some of them over $20,000 a pair. Now, the history is all great, but why is the boot still around? Because it's still functional. One of the things you're going to notice with Western boots is there's no lacing, and that means the boot can be slipped on and off. That's important. If you're riding a horse, you don't want to...
No lacing. Sure. Gotcha. See? Imagine if I went and I was creating, designing characters and I was putting in lacing. It just won't feel authentic. But that's all I
get dragged to your death, and it's happened. It used to be a big thing you had to worry about. So guess what? The boots, if they get caught into something, you can slide right out of them. That was a big reason why they were made the way they were made to be designed. Also, we've got the heel right here. Why do you have a heel on boots? Well, so that it goes right and fits right into a saddle. Whenever you're sitting, basically right there, the stirrups, you want this to fit right in there and stay in place. Now, with toe designs, there's going to be a variety of different... so that it goes right and fits out of them. That was a big reason why they were made the way they were made to be designed. Also, we've got the heel right here. Why do you have a heel on boots? Well, so that it goes right and fits right into a saddle. Whenever you're sitting, basically right there, the stirrups, you're going to see the curved toe. Me personally, I like the look of the curved toe, but I understand why people go with the chisel, why they go actually with a square, why in actually parts of Mexico, check this boot out right here. This is all about showmanship and...
You know, we can definitely play around with the character designs for the chisel, round, and square. So, round and square toe for the shoes. Character designs. You could do some wild stuff. Maybe have a boot go and do like a, you know what I'm talking about. Do a little curly one.
And yes, it is way over the top, but it can also be a style aspect of the boot. Now, what if you're from New York City and just moved to Austin, Texas? You're from Houston, Texas, and you're relocating out to in the taupe helps keep things a bit cooler. That's what the
Now the hat. This might be valuable.
that above all is functional. Whenever you're out in the sun, it is going to keep it off of your head, off of your face, and it really helps keep things a bit cooler. That's what the whole high crown is for. It allows air to circulate. So you would see a number of hats were made from actually a breathable material, would either have holes in there if they were made from felt, or were made from straw, so just air could pass through. It actually evolved from the sombrero, although we saw it
Evolved from the sombrero. Makes sense, don't it? But air to pass through. I always wondered why there were holes. I mean, it seems obvious, but you don't really think about these things.
in many early pictures, a lot of Eastern or Western European hats being used. We even saw, yeah, look at it, you see bowlers that were worn out west. Historically, you saw a wide variety of headwear being used. It really depended on the style, what the gentleman wanted to wear, what was going to actually protect him from the elements, what worked in his settings and his... Now, I think that if you got the cowboy within your heart, shirt they could get their hands on. There were a variety of styles, but most of them were made
this
from
one is talking about a lot of the
on most
attire
Western
and things like that. So if you guys want to learn even further about that, you can go do that. The hats and the boots, for sure, those are the ones I really cared about. Everything else, I think we can kind of figure that out, especially when we get to the character design part of things. So I think we're done here. Right? Well, the last parts. A bandana. Let's hear that.
It did bring kind of the outfit together, did add some color, so there was a little bit of a stylish aspect of the bandana, but most old school bandanas weren't worn because they were bright colored. They were worn because they were incredibly functional. If you put the bandana in this area because you wanted to keep dust from caking onto your skin, it was incredibly uncomfortable, and it just was an added layer of protection. In addition, in a pinch, you could use it as a tourniquet, you could use it to wipe the sweat off your brow. There were so many functions. It was just a very useful piece of gear that probably most cowboys actually did carry. All right, guys, so what video to watch next? Well, check out Whyt.
No, we're good, but good video, though. Good video, though. Good video. Good video. Then you move on to this. Which one do we watch? Which one do we watch? Explained by an idiot. Come on, let's go.
Welcome to the Hateful Eight, which is 3 hours long. I don't know why I keep picking these fucking long-ass movies to make videos about. I'm just making it harder for myself. But anywho, this movie takes place a little after the American Civil War, and all the characters in this movie are on their way to a place called Red Rock. However, there's a big-ass blizzard going on, and they're forced to take shelter in Minnie's haberdashery. And for anybody who's not aware of what a haberdashery is, like me when I first watched this movie, it's basically a place where you can buy sewing equipment and other stuff and shit that you forgot to pack in your travels in the old times, and I guess it also serves as a rest stop for these old times, so you can hang there when you're done.
Haberdashery? That's interesting. I've heard it before.
Tired on long trips, I guess? Now, there are a bunch of characters in this movie, but as the name would suggest, 8 main hateful ones. We got...
Let's go with this.
In Quentin Tarantino's gore-splattered western whodunit, The Hateful Eight, there are no heroes.
Oh, it's a whodunit? Interesting.
Just a room full of violent strangers. But who's telling the truth and who's lying? In this video, I'll break down the film's story, its theme, and will also explain its violent conclusion. Fair warning, this analysis will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen the film, I suggest you watch it first before viewing this video.
That's a good logo. Even giving me ideas for how you know the logo.
2015's The Hateful Eight came on the heels of Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards and Django Unchained. In both those films, victims of the time were allowed a revisionist revenge and closure on the periods depicted. But in his 8th release, Tarantino would painfully remind audiences of the divided present. We'll examine how Tarantino's Western is an allegory for our current times. But first, let's take a quick look at The Hateful Eight's cinematic influences. In almost every review of The Hateful Eight, the comparison to John Carpenter's The Thing is unavoidable. A group of people are trapped in a desolate-filled wasteland, then claustrophobia slides into paranoia, and paranoia consumes the atmosphere for the remainder of both films. We also have an evil that's hiding in plain sight.
One of them fellas is not what he says he is.
Somebody in this camp ain't what he appears to be. Right now, that may be one or two of us. By spring, it could be all of us.
Finally, there's star Kurt Russell, playing a major lead in both films. But almost no American reviews brought up its comparison to the pessimistic 1968 Western, The Great Silence, directed by Italian filmmaker Sergio Corbucci, a major influence on Tarantino. Italian westerns, or spaghetti westerns, were a new movement in the 1960s. Most theatrical westerns had faded out around the same time, and cowboy stories migrated towards television. But in 1964, beginning with Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars, Italian westerns quickly became popular. Unlike Sergio Leone, the other Sergio's films were less about opera and more about depravity. If the westerns of John Ford were about triumph and justice, then Corbucci's westerns were about the unjust and failed societies. Look hard enough and you'll see Corbucci's influence on Tarantino's work.
Shot him down like a dog in the street.
Yes, that's exactly what I mean.
And quick Easter egg, the saloon Dr. King Schultz and Django collect their first bounty in is named Minnesota Clays. Minnesota Clay is also the name of a 1964 Corbucci Western about a wrongfully convicted man who seeks vengeance after a justice system fails him.
The hell you say?
The hell you say?
But The Hateful Eight in particular uses similar motifs to Corbucci's The Great Silence. There's the bleak snow-filled setting and an even bleaker view of a nation built on violence. There's also a group of bounty hunters brought together by
it would suck being in the snow and cold during this time.
Fate, who share a stagecoach at both films' beginnings. Then there's composer Ennio Morricone, whose musical scores complement first The Great Silence, then The Hateful Eight. Both films also feature a strong woman of color. In The Hateful Eight, it's Minnie, the owner of Minnie's Haberdashery. In The Great Silence, it's Vanetta McGee, who hires a bounty hunter played by John Louis Trenton Young to avenge the death of her husband against a ruthless killer played by Klaus Kinski, who hides behind the law while inflicting sadistic violence. Both films could be political allegories of the era they're produced. In this interview, Tarantino explains how most westerns are allegorical of the period they're made.
The Western has always been a really interesting genre I think there's no other genre that reflects the decade in which it was made more than the Westerns made during particular decades. And,
like The Searchers.
Yeah, The Searchers. Yeah. Well, a good example is the 50s, because probably the time when the Westerns were the most popular. They reflected an Eisenhower ideal of America. They reflected a perceived American exceptionalism. All right, having won the World War II, and even the prosperity of America at that time. And they took Western heroes and built them up as demigods, whether it be even outlaws like Bully the Kid or Jesse James and the stories that were told at that period of time. And then obviously characters like Buffalo Bill or Wyatt Earp. But then if you look at the Westerns of the 70s and the very, very late 60s, that was a very cynical time in America. And America had lost trust in itself and had lost trust in its heroes. And actually, the cynicism of movies back then actually confirmed Americans' right to feel cynical about their time period. And the Westerns reflected that.
The Great Silence is an incredibly bleak film. I won't entirely spoil the ending, but I will say it's a comment on the political era it was produced, referencing both the assassinations of Che Guevara and Malcolm X. There's the oppressor, there's the oppressed, and then there's what happens when the two meet. If you want to learn more about the Great Silence, there's many articles and commentaries from director Alex Cox, which I'll link in the description. We've seen how Corbucci used the Western as a political allegory, so now let's see how Tarantino does the same with The Hateful Eight. Unlike most Oscar baity films Hollywood produces on racism, The Hateful Eight wisely chooses not to bash its audience over the head with political correctness. Instead, we the audience are stuck with these 8 despicable characters. You either find something redeemable about them, or you don't. You're now an active participant in this story, and whatever feelings you have towards a character you most identify is either proved right or wrong by the film's end. So let's start from the beginning. The Hateful Eight is a story about fate. By fate, these strangers cross paths. By fate, they're being chased by a deadly blizzard. By fate, some heard of or even know each other, and also by fate, they're all stuck in this one location. It's manifest destiny that brought them here. In one of the opening shots, there's even a large cross looking down over the stagecoach, setting the theme of manifest destiny. A bounty hunter named John Ruth, played by Kurt Russell, escorts a wanted criminal, Daisy Domergue, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh. The stagecoach stops for another bounty hunter named Major Marquez Warren, played by Samuel L. Jackson. Major Warren negotiates his way onto the stagecoach, but only after he disarms for John Ruth. Notice how Major Warren's uniform consists of white gloves, a metaphor for his character, who writes and talks in the language of someone trying to survive in a white man's world. Then we have Chris Mannix, played by Walton Goggins. Mannix claims to be the new sheriff of Red Rock, the town Daisy is to be hung. But unlike Major Warren,
nope,
and that his status alone should be enough to board John Ruth's stagecoach. It first appears Mannix has more in common with Daisy than with Warren and John Ruth. The conversation quickly becomes political as Mannix, a southern rebel, feuds with northerner Major Warren. The two men are set up as adversaries for the remainder of the film. The other threat besides the hateful strangers is the blizzard outside. In John Carpenter's A Thing, the monster comes from outer space in the form of a shape-shifting alien. But in The Hateful Eight, the monster is a snowy blizzard that's used as a metaphor for hate itself. Then there's the horses, one white, the other black, moving through what they've both been conditioned to tolerate. So why would Tarantino decide to shoot his movie in a wide aspect ratio of 70mm, only to have it remain in a confined space with a few actors? Well, there's a few reasons. First, Tarantino used confined spaces with wide-angle shots the same way Stanley Kubrick did with The Shining. In The Shining, Kubrick had several sequences where he uses wide-angle shots in smaller spaces. This not only gives off a feeling of claustrophobia, but it also desensitizes the audience as the environment swallows up its inhabitants. Second, this is an actor's movie. Director John Cassavetes once said, "The greatest location in the world is the human face." The Hateful Eight is a film that relies mostly on its performances. In 70mm, you'll spot more details that the wide aspect ratio allows you to notice. Upon second and third viewings, you'll notice details like Daisy laughing at Oswaldo's proper English accent, because later in the film, it's revealed that he actually speaks with a working class Cockney accent.
So I got a federal bounty of $15,000 on my head.
Details within the frame are an important part of this story. When Major Warren spots certain details in minis, he knows something bad has happened, yet he still keeps his poker face in this group of strangers. As the film progresses, we the audience aren't given much to go on as to who's lying and who's being truthful. After being prodded by Chris Mannix, Major Warren confesses the Lincoln letter is a lie. This upsets John Ruth, who says,
Well, I guess it's true what they say about you people. Can't trust a fucking word comes out of your mouth.
Warren admits the letter is a lie, but he also admits it's that very lie that's kept him alive.
The only time black folks is safe is when white folks is disarmed. And this letter had the desired effect of disarming white folks.
It's no coincidence why Tarantino uses Abraham Lincoln in his film, because it was President Lincoln who emancipated 3 million slaves in his proclamation, "Shall be then, henceforward, and forever free."
Okay. We're getting it. Getting the vibe. Getting the,
in a shooting.
Getting
Let's
what
take
to
a
look
quick
for.
look at Tarantino.
Getting what to look for. How to handle some of these.
Or greatly exaggerated.
But
either way, the story.
It's not too useful to what I'm trying to do. I feel like I've gotten all I can out of this. For now. I don't know if anything else is being said. Let me see here. Let me see here. Yeah, it's I get more out of like the historical facts of things versus even the video essays, even though those are useful because I have gotten some stuff out of this. But I think the historical stuff is actually more useful to what I'm trying to achieve here, which is good to know. Good to know.
Neo-Westerns seem to be in conflict with the past. 1903 marked the year the American Western was born. The Great Train Robbery,
we saw
while
that
only
already.
a 12-minute-long silent short, became the first of many films whose genre would come to define old Hollywood well into the 1960s.
That dude died. That's like
It was a staple of the American
weirdest
movie-going experience. Back in its heyday, the Western's popularity was the equivalent of the superhero genre nowadays. It thrived in films, TV shows, and even radio serials.
Was that the old Westworld? No, that's the Magnificent Seven.
Films, TV shows,
But this
and
dude
even
looks
radio
like the old
serials.
Westworld
As with
guy.
any other trend within the audiovisual medium, its status as the dominating genre was not meant to last forever. Eventually, the film genre decreased in popularity. As filmgoers' attentions shifted, newer technologies were introduced, tastes changed, and social sensibilities evolved. Westerns were still being produced, but they weren't as much in demand. From time to time, westerns reminiscent of the classic ones are released, and that quasi-mythic time period is revisited. But it's not the same anymore. In the last 2 decades, there have been a few filmmakers revisiting the relic of old Hollywood, looking at it through fresh eyes, offering different viewpoints, and giving it a contemporary update. The neo-western. There are a few different descriptions of the genre out there, so for the sake of this video, we will define it as follows. Films that deal with the recurring themes of the old western,
Logan's,
but set in a modern world. Themes such as protectionism, the gray areas in the law, survival, and the changing times are prevalent. And so are the external elements such as shootouts, standoffs, outlaws, gunslingers, and horses, but within a newer, more familiar and personal context. The stories are grounded, realistic, gritty, mostly bleak, and don't promise happy endings. They compel us to look at an imperfect world and all its intricacies. They feel like a self-aware epilogue to the folk stories of the Old West, where the past is seen under a critical lens and the future is uncertain. In today's video, we will be exploring the recurring themes shared by the films belonging to the neo-western genre. Some spoilers will follow.
So this one is going to talk about the themes within it. Go on.
Oh yeah, Charles, we got ourselves an X-Men fan. You do know they're all bullshit, right? Maybe a quarter of it
End
happened.
of romance.
Not like this.
French film theorist Christian Metz believed that movie genres go through 4 cycles during their lifespan. The experimental stage is the beginning, where the genre's blueprints are created, its rules are set, serving as a foundation for the next stage. The classical stage follows by having the genre's rules become iconic, and set as the standards for the genre. The tropes and formula are embraced. The parody stage is when the genre's guiding principles are so well known that they can be used to make fun of itself. Finally, the deconstruction stage is when the genre evolves. The deconstruction stage is when the genre evolves beyond its own conventions and breaks its original. The parody stage is when the genre's guiding principles are so well known that they can be used to make fun of itself. Finally, the deconstruction stage is when the genre evolves beyond its own conventions and breaks its original rules. creating something that can't be defined as belonging to only one
Westworld.
category, but a fusion of genres. Neo-Westerns are born from the deconstruction stage. They continue where the Western left off, the reevaluation of past ideals and exploration of moral ambiguities. Hell or High Water perfectly illustrates the disaffection that comes from seeing how the world has changed and what it's becoming. The film often looks back at the way things were in the past, and deals with a new reality that forces its characters to evolve and operate in questionable gray areas. The main characters, Toby and Tanner, established their own brand of frontier justice in order to fight the system that was supposed to protect them, but took advantage of their family's ranch.
You know, they loaned the least they could, just enough to keep your mama poor on a guaranteed return. Thought they could swipe her land for $25,000.
To further represent the disillusionment, whenever a character expresses an opinion of their way of life, it's done so in a negative manner.
21st century, I'm racing a fire in the river with a herd of cattle. And I wonder why my kids won't do this shit for a living.
What am I supposed to do with a ranch?
How is anybody supposed to make a living here?
What might have been an ideal in the past is seen as a burden. It's no longer romanticized. This can also be seen in Logan, a film that is not only a neo-Western, but also dovetails into the deconstruction stage of the superhero genre. Logan is a man that is trying to steer clear from his past. His superhero life may be idolized by others, but all he can remember is the pain that came from it. He knows those stories are only dressed up versions of what really happened, which is what makes him reject them as lies.
In the real world, people die, and no self-promoting asshole in a fucking leotard can stop it. This is ice cream for bedwetters.
Neo-Westerns are the realization and awareness that many of the stories and myths we've been encouraged to believe might be false. They might have been real in some capacity at a certain point in time for a specific person, but now it's just a fairy tale. They are the last stanza in a verse that serves to conclude our fascination with the Old West. When the stories are over, and you look back at them not through nostalgic eyes, but with an understanding that it's time to move on.
Long time ago, your ancestors was the Indians. Someone came along and killed them.
Okay. I think I know.
Made you into one of...
No, son. That was all a repo.
During an interview where the Western genre was being discussed, Quentin Tarantino stated that more than any other genre, the Western reflects the decade.
The Westerns of the 50s.
We heard that.
A Watergate.
Which didn't get to have a say back when the old Westerns were big. It's no wonder that the American identity cannot be one sole thing for everyone.
Okay, so a lot of these videos will go like
This
really
uncertainty.
deep into it, and so it's got me thinking. I think we've gathered,
and to an extent, reevaluation of a thrive in the world at Alejandro. In Wind River, the character wants to pay his mother's debt and leave something behind for his children. The way he's achieving this is illegal, but he sees it as the only way to escape his inherited cycle of poverty.
It's like a disease.
yeah. So I think I've gathered what I can from this one too. And I'm also realizing I think I don't have to like fully be done fully with all the research to at least begin with like maybe some of the story ideas of what I'm going to do. Because then once that begins, it will actually give me a little bit more direction with the research itself and know exactly what to research versus researching everything, right? Because I have this a laundry list of things that I want to research, right? And just look through and be a little bit more familiar with, as that builds confidence in the decisions I'm making. But I'm realizing now that actually I don't need to go through everything. I can start to still build the story I want to build with what I have now. I think I've gotten some really valuable stuff already. And then I can always come back to the research where necessary. But I think we have enough to begin because, again, we're not trying to do something that is completely historically accurate or anything like that. We're going to take a lot of liberties. And so as a result, we can begin really cooking the story and the world and what we need. And then as time goes on, we can revert back to the research because if you look at the document, right, I even talked about how the same way the script kind of dictates the storyboard, but then the storyboard can dictate the script. We can kind of go completely back and forth throughout the thing. But these are still helpful. Let me see this one. Okay, the standoffs, the Mexican standoff. Yeah, see, that was good. High tension and stuff. But this will actually be, interesting too.
Westerns have been around pretty much as long as films have been around. What many regard to be the first narrative film was a Western called The Great Train Robbery. This was released in 1903. Westerns continued to play a big role in cinema up until about the 1970s, with names such as Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, John Ford, and Sergio Leone being absolute powerhouses in the genre. But in 1964, with the release of A Fistful of Dollars, Sergio Leone created his own subgenre, the spaghetti western. With his continuation of the Dollars trilogy with For a Few Dollars More, and then of course The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, Leone is one of, if not the most acclaimed Western directors. He propelled Clint Eastwood to stardom, making him perhaps the most recognisable name in Western films, and his style eventually became the trademark of Westerns as a whole. When people think of classic Westerns, more likely than not they think of The Final Showdown in The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, or a mysterious man hunted down outlaws in the pursuit of money or revenge. Almost all of these classic tropes can be traced back to the spaghetti western and Leone, and that is why I believe the reasons Westerns are seen as so cool is because of Leone and his films. Sure, Westerns before him established the settings, some of the tropes, etc., but Leone elevated the genre to a new level. But what makes his films so special, and why have they become so ingrained in popular culture? I believe to answer this we can look at 4 of Leone's films. Firstly, we have A Fistful of Dollars, which centres around Clint Eastwood riding into town ruled by 2 rival gangs. He then joins both of them and pits them against each other, ending in both gangs dead and Eastwood with all their money. For a Few Dollars More is about rival bounty hunters Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef in the pursuit of the outlaw El Indio. They eventually team up and take down the outlaw and his gang together. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly has 3 main characters. The Good, which is a mysterious drifter played by Clint Eastwood. The Bad, a sadistic and ruthless mercenary dressed in all black played by Van Cleef. And the Ugly, a fast-talking bandito played by Eli Wallach. These 3 characters are in the search of lost Confederate gold amidst the backdrop of the Civil War. Finally, we have Once Upon a Time in the West. This is about a mysterious drifter teaming up with a bandito to defend a widow from an infamous mercenary on the backdrop of a dying West, with the railroad bringing civilization and the end to the era of gunslingers and outlaws. As you can probably tell, plot-wise these films definitely have similar themes, but when put together they allow us to clearly understand Leone's style and identify the common elements that have become so instrumental to the genre. And I believe these elements are also the main reason Westerns have become so iconic and just so cool. But firstly, let's look at the context surrounding these films, as that can help us get a greater understanding of their rise to fame. European Westerns had been around for a long time before Sergio Leone, but it was with the release of A Fistful of Dollars that the spaghetti western was really born, and it created the model for future films of this style. This model centered around a gruff and laconic hero with almost superhuman skills with a gun. This contrasts the slick and clean-shaven hero seen in American westerns, John Wayne being the best example. This hero would usually join a gang to further his own...
What you doing, bro? Yeah. What you doing? You want to watch? You want to watch? This is Manga Meow. Want to watch? Want to watch a western? Okay.
Agenda, and there would often be an old man, typically an undertaker or a barman, who acts as his sidekick, and an eccentric Mexican bandit. Many future Italian films followed this blueprint, such as Blood for a Silver Dollar and A Pistol for Ringo. This subgenre then went on to be influenced by Leone's For a Few Dollars More, and of course The Good, the Bad and the Ugly made waves in the genre, and is probably the most iconic western of them all. However, back in the 60s when these films were coming out, many American critics saw them as a problem. For them, they represented the true beginning of an Italian invasion of an American genre, as up until then, Italian westerns remained mainly in Italy and Europe. These American critics focused on the graphic and cynical violence on display, and a lack of commitment to a strong sense of realism, and they saw these aspects as a threat to their previously all-American genre. However, time has obviously been very kind to Leone's films, as they go down as some of the best westerns of all time and dominate the genre as a whole. Perhaps the initial opposition to them actually helped them come across as more cool, as they went against the status quo.
But what was the conception of these films? What were they based off and what allowed them to come into being? As I said before, Italian cinema was no stranger to the Western genre. However, where Leone's someone else, this could think of his harmonica from Once Upon a Time in the West, but then satire and the fact that they don't take themselves too seriously makes these films stand apart from other westerns and perhaps contributes to their coolness. It's also worth noting that A Fistful of Dollars is heavily influenced and is almost a direct remake of Kurosawa's Yojimbo. Both involve our central characters arriving at a town with two competing gangs vying for supremacy. He then joins both gangs and pits them against each other. Kurosawa even said in a letter to Leone that his film was a very fine film, but it is my film. This heavy influence led to Leone surrendering the Asian rights to Kurosawa. But despite this influence, A Fistful of Dollars did have its own directional style and saw the beginning of the rise of the spaghetti western overseas. Perhaps the most obvious answer to what makes westerns so cool is the setting. The sun-beaten American West, small towns isolated from any form of wider society, and obviously the lawlessness that puts the wild in Wild West are a key part of any western film. This setting really lays the groundwork for all further elements of these films, and it sets the stage for bounty hunters, outlaws, banditos, and all the common characters that we expect to see. It also has an element of ruggedness to it, as it is a harsh place to live both in terms of the climate and the people, with the arid landscape and the constant threat of outlaws. I believe this set is no better realised in the scene from Once Upon a Time in the West, when Frank and his gang kill the McBain family. The first half of this scene established a physical element to the setting. This is your classic homestead. The inhabitants are hunting and farming in order to provide for themselves. The constant cricket sounds add an element of barrenness to this setting, giving a feeling of isolation. These crickets intermittently stop, creating an ominous sense of foreboding. Perhaps there are other forces at play. Outlaws, this war is chaotic. All of Leone's westerns have a similar and distinct style. Leone's signature direction is really what cemented him as one of the most acclaimed western directors. But what is his style? Well, the first thing you notice is probably the use of music. Ennio Morricone's amazing score for all of Leone's films established the soundscape of the western genre as a whole, with his work on The Good, the Bad and the Ugly being some of the most iconic film music of all time. He perfectly encapsulates the spirit of the West, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly sounding incredibly climactic. This music is very much at the heart of Leone. Scenes have no speech but just some music blaring and they are still very compelling. This leads on to another aspect of Leone's style. He uses very little dialogue for the most part. Of course there are exceptions such as Tuco and The Good, the Bad and the come across as more intimidating and calculating. This is probably where the silent badass character archetype originated, influencing Anton to the worlds he creates, making sure they don't become too grounded in reality, as ultimately these films are just grown-up fairy tales for American dads. Honestly, I don't think I'm smart enough to fully analyse Leone's direction, but he can certainly portray a lot without saying much. For all the factors I just talked about and more, Leone's films have such a unique feeling. He doesn't take himself too seriously, but still manages to tell the story.
Okay. So let's see how long we've been cooking. See how long we've been cooking here. Wave of inspiration goes both ways. Okay, we got some Western connoisseurs. Is that the word? In the comments. But yeah, I'm thinking we can actually obviously keep doing more and more research, but we don't actually have to like go through, like I don't have to go through every single thing right now, or at least go through every single thing before beginning. So what I'm going to do, right, this was valuable research. And I think the next move, the way we're going to cook, what do you want to do, meow? Just Manga meow. Yep, there you go. So what I'm going to do is I might go through a couple others, and I will create the list of videos that I'm watching, and I'll put that, I'll link everything in the member section. So if if any of y'all want to see the videos that I'm watching and things like that, you want to watch them for yourselves as well, I'll put them in there. I also share it with the Patreon I'm maybe creating a playlist actually, and then I'll just share the playlist. I think that's the easiest thing to do, because there's a couple other videos, and I don't want the stream to just be me watching videos. Now that I think about it, but to just see some of it, to see a glimpse of it, I think was valuable, and to see how my brain would kind of be working with that was interesting. And I think in the next stream, I would kind of take all of that and we really get into the meat of the characters. Pause. Let me see what we got here. Because for the next plans, we're looking at like, so building that world or lore or prophecies and things like that, almost building this mystical Western as well. Some of the themes that were kind of talked about, how, it can be deconstructed, changed, and, combined with other genres, which is obviously what I'm going to do. I think we'll start to build all of that. I'll still see if I can watch a couple more videos, but so for the next stream, maybe you might not catch every aspect of the process, but you'll get the main stuff, because then we'll start to cook, because we're going to start building characters. We're going to start building what their ideology could be, and it'll be a little bit more engaging, because maybe we can talk back and forth to hear what you guys think about some of the ideas that I'll be coming up with, and then also some of the names that we got and some of the information that I got in the older videos, and some of these names and popular cowboys. I might already start thinking about ideas of what I could use them for, or how I could use them, and how they could be incorporated into the concept, into the world building and history and all that good stuff. But then maybe how they might not be characters, but they might influence the characters that we'd be making. But yeah, we're going to start cooking in that direction, and then maybe you might even have a synopsis sooner than I'd like, because I think the synopsis stuff, I wanted to have that later on, probably like 3 streams later, kind of like cooking the synopsis and the power system in one stream, like fully cementing it enough to move forward. But it'll be nice to have at least a simple version of the idea of what the story could be, right? While all this is happening, I'll still be watching those videos, and I'll share the videos. Like I said, I'll share the videos for members of the channel and people who are on Patreon. But I'll just be watching that in the background, and then we'll just continue to cook. So the next time we stream, it'll be mostly about starting to. We might not finalize any of these characters, but at least start drawing some characters, right? So we'll get back into some drawing, if you know what I'm saying. And then obviously building some of the, doing both, I guess, at the same time. And then we'll go from there. Right before we close off the stream, y'all can, if you guys have any questions, you guys can let me know. What we've witnessed is just me doing some of the research, trying to, I guess, myself be more versed into the world of cowboys and why things work, right? It just makes what I end up making more authentic. It gives me more confidence in the decisions I'm making, on more of an understanding of why things are the way they are, how they've been done, what's the history behind them, and then also how I can kind of subvert maybe expectations in my own work. It just builds a little bit more originality and authenticity when I'm creating something of the Western ilk, if that makes sense. What cons are you aiming for this year? Probably Anime NYC, Expo, probably be a DreamCon again. But a lot of that will be announced through Saturday AM. So if you follow Saturday AM, you follow me on a lot of the on social media in general, you will always be aware of all of that. But that's what I'm thinking. Anime NYC, Expo, DreamCon, the usual suspects, probably NYCC and SDCC again, most likely. and then we'll kind of push from there. A couple tiny ones here and there, something in maybe North Carolina, so NC Comic Con. I didn't go to the last one, but maybe the next. Then let's see what we got here. Is there a specific story you're looking to tell with this one shot? That's what we're trying to figure out. The whole part of this whole process is to sheer me coming up with a manga from scratch. And when I mean from scratch, I mean from scratch. So like, we don't even really know what the name of the series is going to be. There's a draft name right there, The Heartbreak Kid, but you know, it might be something else. You never know. Let me see. The Lone Ranger comic is the best Western comic. I might look into that. It'll be good to see how comics, because right now I'm just using film, but it'll be good to see some comics, maybe some Japanese ones too. Let me see here. Actually, here are some. People said to check out JoJo, so Steel Ball Run. Or just Steel Ball Run. It's not necessarily. Is that JoJo? Is the JoJo creator. Then Green Blood, Cowboy Bebop, Trigun, Gun Frontier, Desert Punk, Gun Blaze West, Peacemaker, Stranger, Hellsing. Is that a Western? JoJo's Bizarre. So actual JoJo's Bizarre. Gungrave, Go West, Outlaw Star, etc. Big O, Ghost in the Shell. Okay, now you're getting sci-fi. Priest. Somebody mentioned Priest before, so I'll check this out. Is Claymore a Western? I don't know. But the thing is, I think they may be Teriyaki Western. I think there may be elements of these that will be interesting to look at, right? That might help fuel my visual mind for what I'm eventually going to do. So that'll be interesting. Zombie Powder. Forgot about that one. That'll be nice. That will be nice. That will be nice. So maybe in the future I'll have some, like, even after we create a synopsis, nothing is set in stone until stuff is made. So I might have another video doing research, but then that research would be a lot more comic based, and just to see, and this time it'll be honestly more me just kind of observing on my own and not listening in a video essay. There might be a video essay or a documentary here and there, but for the most part, I think I'll just be looking at it by myself. Just to see how these guys have done certain things, and see how maybe it might influence some of the decisions that I make. But yeah, I'll definitely look at some comics too. Yeah, you don't have to pull from that. You pull from other genres. That is true. It doesn't have to be Western. I think the whole thing about Western, why I want to really engulf myself in that, is because I haven't historically. I don't have that much experience with it. And so with the other genres, I know where to pull from, at least for me, as I am. At least enough so. But with Westerns, not so much. And so just today, I've learned a lot. Especially with that first video, I learned a lot. And so definitely we'll be drawing a lot from just shonen manga in general, regardless of the genre, or all kinds of stuff, right? For sure. Anybody any questions on TikTok? Take a look at the movie The Harder They Fall. It's about cowboys and bank robbers. Definitely will. That's Mike Tony. Y'all can go check out Mike Tony. He's pretty good. It's very good actually with his work. Go check him out. But yeah, unless anybody has any questions, the stream will come to a close. I'll try to keep the streams anywhere from 2 to 3 hours a day, so it won't be too crazy. But the ones where maybe we have to draw something, I'll make sure like we get a lot of time into those. Get a lot of time into those. Again, I don't know why the stream didn't work for Instagram to this time. It's just one of those weird things. But it is what it is. Again, before we close, for those who don't know, the creator of Apple Black. If you haven't gotten the volume, please do so. You can leave reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. If you haven't gotten the books, I appreciate you. Don't forget to like these videos. Just like wherever you're watching this, especially on YouTube. And I would really appreciate all the support. I already appreciate all the support I've gotten so far for the volumes. And then if you have gotten any other Saturday AM books, I also want to thank you on behalf of the team. Right, there's a lot of heavy hitters. A lot of our books have either won some awards or have been nominated for some comic book awards. So that's always cool. And so I highly recommend you guys check those out. I just got a DM of someone who is sending me an image of them getting volume 5. So that's pretty good. So the more you guys get it, the better. Increases the chances of all kinds of things where the world and the series can exist in, you know, other forms, if you know what I'm saying. So it only helps the chances. And you know, eventually maybe we'll have some streams that kind of break from this whole cowboy mission thing and we just kind of vibe. And maybe we do some Apple Black streams and just talk about it, almost like a little book club thing. Definitely gonna do that for at least the members and stuff like that. But really appreciate it. Good thing about the feedback I've gotten from the books is that everybody's enjoyed the books and they've enjoyed each book better than the last, and I kind of want to continue that trend. So that was fun. Subscribe to the channels or follow me on wherever you're watching this. That also helps a great deal. And I want to be able to do these consistently enough and kind of keep going. And I think for the next stream, I want to, like, I wouldn't develop any ideas, but I want to come in with some ideas and then we can talk about them. You know what I mean? And that maybe is like where I can take the story. So without all the Western stuff, the Western stuff is kind of like the skin to an extent of what the story could be. But like the story itself could be a million things. And especially now that I've gotten some information, I think I'll come into the next stream with some ideas, but I won't think too hard about them. And then we'll kind of think on stream. I'd love to hear what you guys think, and then we'll continue to cook that way. We good? All right. This has been fun, guys. Let me see. Still super new, but Dying Laughing is a super cool American Western anime by Chase Conley. I know. I saw Chase's stuff, and the Western energy there is also pretty good. I'm gonna actually look at that again. Hey man, can I get a personal feedback? I forget that. Yeah, definitely. You know, always. Just make sure to also message me on Patreon, and then we'll kind of get that going. This is a very unusual thing for the channel, an unusual stream compared to all the other streams that we've ever had on the channel. We've not had many, but hopefully we'll change that trend. Regular videos are also coming back, so don't worry. This is not the norm, or this is only adding to the norm. Thank you, Serenity Rivera. Appreciate you if you're enjoying Apple Black, and hopefully more Apple Black will be enjoyed further. Still writing the rest of the arc, finalizing certain things. Writing a tournament arc, it's not as easy as you think, but writing volume 6 and 7 and making sure it is heat. But yeah, just DM me on the Patreon, and then I'll always, especially people who on there, or even like the member tier on YouTube, I'll always try to help as best as I can, as I have for some people there. And then we'll just continue to cook. So, with that being said,